What up, everybody? It's your boy Aaron coming to you with another episode of First and Faithful. On today's episode, we're going to go over Rich Eisen's comments that he thought the Niners have had the best offseason in the NFL. But before we get into it, this is the part where I beg and plead for you to click the like and subscribe button, send a comment, all that jazz right there. Just takes 2 seconds of your time. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate all of you coming through. Thank you as always. Well, let's get into it. Rich Eisen on today's show, like I said, had a comment today. Went into it about him thinking that the Niners had the best offseason. This is in response to Frank Schwab over at Yahoo Sports, who wrote kind of a winners and losers article going through each team and kind of gave them a grade for their offseason. Had the Niners at a C minus. And basically what he had was basically, their key losses. Obviously lost Buck. Obviously lost Emmanuel Sanders. Key additions, he had none. I'm not sure if he forgot that they traded for Trent Williams. I don't know. I mean, honestly, Staley probably should have been the key losses as well. I don't know if he just totally forgot or I don't know. But at the very least, I would think Trent Williams would be in the key additions. I mean, that is a huge, huge addition. So in response to that, they were speaking on Rich Eisen's show, and they're going through the grades. His co-host was like, they have the Niners kind of towards the bottom. And Rich Eisen, basically shut that down. And basically what his logic, he said, quote, the Niners had, quote, the best offseason of anyone in the NFL. And basically his reasoning was, they got younger, they got better, they managed their cap situation and their staff, their major, components of their coaching staff stayed intact. And that was basically his reasoning why they had the best offseason, basically because they're already at the top, right? They're already at the top. They didn't need to go get DeAndre Hopkins or Tom Brady, or they didn't need to do these huge, big splash moves that you usually see from teams that are at the bottom. And by and large, he's right. You rarely see teams make the big splash moves. Patriots are a team that usually doesn't. Antonio Brown may be an exception, basically because he came basically free, I think was why they, took a flyer on him, because why the hell not? But usually he's right. You don't see the really big teams make the big splash moves. They don't need to. They're more interested in, getting better through the draft, younger, maintaining the core, but always kind of replenishing that with younger, cheaper options. That's how the good teams kind of stay good. If you're a Niners fan for any length of time, Bill Walsh was a big proponent of that. Staying young, staying fresh, basically replenishing, as your veterans start to age out, you have that young crop coming right in and ready to replace them, and his big thing was obviously getting rid of the players a year too early rather than a year too late. But going over some of the losses, and I don't necessarily agree the Niners have had the best offseason. I think that's a kind of a fool's errand. I know a lot of people say the Cardinals, they got Nuke and the trade, and off-season winners and that's I don't really get into that. Last off-season we thought the Browns won the off-season. We all saw what happened. It has to gel on the field, or if it's basketball, it's to gel on the court. Like you can say every year there's a team that wins the offseason, they crumble. I mean, we can point to a lot of teams that make these big splash moves and it ends up just falling apart. Raiders last season, probably a pretty good example of that. Cleveland as well, a pretty good example of that team. You're like, oh my God, they got OBJ and Mayfield second season, and falls apart, and you're like, oh my God, what happened? So I don't put a lot of stock into the, in terms of winners and losers in the offseason. You have to do it on the field. But to address some of the loss of Buckner and the loss of Sanders as key losses, and I for Buckner, for me, It is a big loss. I love that they got Kinlaw. I think he can fill in that role. I don't think he has to be what Buckner was or what Buckner is, if you will. Because for me, to the biggest piece of the D line, for me the most important piece of that D line is going to be D Ford. D Ford, is he healthy? If you tell me D Ford is healthy the entire season, he gives you a season like he gave the Chiefs his last season, right, where he's pretty much healthy the entire season. Killon only has to be 75-8% of what Buckner is. When D Ford is on that field, what he does for that team is I would say unmeasurable, but it is measurable. We have numbers right here. The sack rate with D Ford on the field last season was 16.2% when he's on the field. When he was off the field, it dropped to 5.4%. The pressure rate 32% with him on the field. The pressure rate when he was off the field 24.8%. I mean, that's a huge. I mean, just the sack rate 16.2 to 5.4. I mean, that is such. And you saw it towards the end of the season. I believe they only have 4 sacks combined the last 5 games of the regular season. Ford came back for the playoffs. You saw against Minnesota, sack. They were dominant against Green Bay and even against Kansas City. Got to Mahomes multiple times. You saw what having Ford on the field does for that D line, and then of course what it does for that defense in general. So to me, that is a much more important part this season. If you say D Ford's healthy, you tell me D Ford, it gives me that season like he had 2 seasons ago. This defense is going to be just as good, maybe better than it was last season, to be perfectly honest. Kinlaw does not have to replace Buckner completely. You can be 80% Buckner, and that defense can be just as good as it was last season if D Ford is completely healthy. So that's why the loss of Buckner is big, but you replace him with a younger player. A lot of people think is the best D tackle in the draft. Obviously he doesn't have to carry the team like Buckner basically had to do for many seasons. He has a very talented group of guys around him. He has time, which is really nice. Moving to the Sanders loss, and I've been saying this since he left. Overrated loss. I love Sanders. Sanders is one of my favorite dudes because he works. I love his swag. Big fan, great hands. Just one of those guys. However, I think the biggest thing he brought to the Niners last season was his leadership in the locker room. How he took Debo, he took Bourne under his wing, showed them how to be professionals, how to be, how to prepare for games, after the games, during the games. Like he really taught them, I think, how to be NFL receivers, the ins and outs, the fine details, right? And I think that is the biggest thing he brought to that team was that leadership and teach them how to be professionals to that high level that he is. Now I think he's imparted that knowledge. Though. I think Debo has taken that knowledge. Bourne's taken that knowledge. And they are ready to move forward. It's like the teacher. You're in 4th grade. You move to 5th grade. You usually change teachers. You've moved on. You've graduated to the next level. I think they've done that as far as production goes. Sanders, he had 2 games that were big. Week 9 against the Cardinals, went 7 for 112 and touchdown. Week 14 against the Saints, 7 catches, 157 and a touchdown. That represented yards wise, that's over half of his total production for the Niners during his regular season games, and over 2/3 of his touchdowns. From a production standpoint, there's not much to make up. I think Brandon Ayuk can easily make that up. I would say the loss of Debo just in the vacuum is a bigger deal than losing Sanders in the vacuum, just because, I think Sanders, I think you saw by the end of the season, playoffs, Super Bowl, had far, outpaced Sanders in terms of production and value on the field. I think Brandon Ayuk can easily replicate that production, be more explosive. I also believe that Debo and Samuel can impart the knowledge that Sanders gave to him and be the leaders for Brandon Ayuk and maybe Pettis as well, and some of the Juwan Jennings. All those guys can impart the knowledge that Sanders imparted onto them. They can give it out to the new guys coming in. So like I said, I think that's the biggest thing he brought was how to be professionals. But I think they've taken that knowledge and you see him ready to take that next step. So I know people point to the loss of Sanders. I just think it's overrated because I think they took what the biggest thing he had to give was that, not his production on the field, but what he brought to the locker room. They got that, and got all the teachings they could, I think, get from him. So the loss of Sanders isn't a big deal. But at the end of the day, did they have the best offseason? No, I don't think they had the quote unquote best offseason. Is it a C minus? Also, no. I think it's somewhere. If I had to give a grade, it's a solid. I think B plus. I think the fact that, like Eisen's, Rich Eisen said, you were able to get younger, get cheaper, and also keep your coaching solid state, which is great. I think a lot of us thought he was out the door for sure. He stayed. Obviously Shanahan stayed, got a 6-year extension. I think they only lost 2. I think a DB's coach and their pass rush specialist coach. Both went to Cleveland, I believe. Everybody else stayed, so I think that is huge for the team. So I give us all B plus. The fact that they lost Staley and then replaced him, I think, with an upgrade in Trent Williams is huge. I like the draft picks. I like the Juwan Jennings draft picks. I love the Brandon Ayuk draft pick. The Kinlaw draft pick. Like I said, you got younger, you got cheaper, and then when you factor in some of the players that were injured last season coming back, this season ESPN had them ranked the number 3 best roster top to bottom in the league, and I think that's a testament. You lost Sanders, you lost Buckner, and you're still the number 3 rated roster in the NFL. That's saying something. That shows they've done great. They've done a great job drafting. Developing talent, and so for me, like I said, a solid BB plus. Like I said, giving grades on off season is kind of silly, but if I had to, BB plus. But that's just my thoughts. Let me know what your guys' thoughts are. Leave a comment below. Let me know what you would give so far the Niners off season grades. Obviously, Kittle's still not signed. That might affect some of your guys' grades. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Thanks as always for tuning in. I'm Aaron. This is First and Faithful. Have a great day.